the number one thing that you want to manage in people's perceptions if you want to do a good job of delivering a story. And this is stuff that I began all the way back in 1984 with my very, very first plaintiff attorneys group. Rapport. And these days, I have the advantage of research I didn't have back then because it's only been accomplished in the last 12 to 15 years. The first man who ever hired me to train a group of attorneys used this technique with a defense expert, a man who made his living testifying for doctors and hospitals against injured patients and their plaintiff attorneys. When he mentioned his name in the group of 35 people, the first group of lawyers I ever sat in, two people groaned out loud. One man actually put his head on the table in front of him. So apparently this guy had cut a swath across southern Minnesota. This guy says, I went into deposition with him for the 10th or 12th time. I did everything else the same, but I used this technique with him. Every answer he gave became longer. Within a half an hour, he began volunteering information, a professional witness. And then he finally had to be taken out in the hall and woodshedded by his own attorney. Last August, I got a letter from a guy telling me about this technique being used with what they termed hostile judges. We got together for half a day. I showed them how to establish rapport with the judge and how to approach them in such a way that you alone might blunt the hostility. He sent me a letter about how he'd gone through motions day with a judge, watching her tear up the 10 groups of attorneys that came before him and his opponent and the 10 groups of attorneys that came after, but somehow she found it okay as far as his proposals were. He did not get everything he wanted, but he got 90% of it. If you're looking at how to establish rapport, it helps to remember that the first 4 steps of the train of thought all take place outside consciousness. That means if you're going to approach them, you cannot approach them through language. You cannot approach them through concepts. Most people think if you're going to develop rapport, you develop rapport based on a notion, an idea, or a concept. So we share an interest in sports. We share an interest in good food. We share an interest in getting this thing resolved so we can both go off on vacation. Whatever that conceptual, conscious interest is, yes, you can develop some rapport there, but that's only the icing on the cake. The cake has to be made non-verbally. Here's the territory you want to start looking to develop rapport in. Notice that 3 of the 6 can be done on the phone because a lot of work has to be done that way. Rapport actually comes in 3 levels. Alignment is what you'll see whenever you look at a group of people, including a jury, and you see them all sitting, 3 or 4 of them sitting the same way, like the original illustration. 2 or 3 of them will have their head tilted. If one person uncrosses their legs and you watch closely, within 10 seconds, 2 other people uncross their legs and rearrange themselves the exact same way. That is not enough. Posture and vocal mirroring happen naturally, but greatly increased rapport, which is what you're after, does not always follow. You need to mirror somebody deliberately long enough to get attunement. And that's another natural occurring situation where people finish each other's sentences for them, when people both reach for the car door or the door handle at the same time, or a piece of paper on the table at the same time. This is all you really need. You can go further and get to full rapport and engagement, and there are some things that may help you in that regard. For instance, the biggest one is, according to the research, you can take people from a position of reticence or boredom straight up to interest and even empathy by doing this for less than 30 seconds. The technique takes about half a day to teach. I just want to expose it to you now so you know it's there. And now I have the benefit of being able to tell you the numbers say it's not just anecdotal. In a research that was done at the INSEAD Business School, it turns out that it's almost 7 out of 10 times people will buy a product you're selling to them if you mirror them, and only 1 out of 10 times they'll buy it if you don't. Down at Duke University, near where David Ball comes from, a woman named Robin Tanner did what she thinks is the first experiment among many now that showed that not only will people get to the outcome, they'll buy your product more. As a matter of fact, in this case, it was a soft drink. People smelled it, touched it, drank it more, talked about it more. But if the seller who is mirroring you tells you they've got a vested interest, I might get a bonus program, I get a scholarship or whatever, the buyer will actually turn to them and try to help them sell them. Put this into the context of your next voir dire. If you could use a strictly nonverbal technique, as you say whatever you were normally going to say during voir dire anyway, or anytime you're approaching the bench. And know that you can take people from a position of hostility to at least neutral, if not all the way up to empathy. What would stop you from doing that? Even in the Netherlands, they're telling us mirrored subjects are more than twice as likely to help the researcher who mirrors them. That's what you're after, is empathic resonance. This is what the experts call it. Empathic resonance is available to almost anyone because it's a naturally occurring human phenomena, just like the train of thought is, just like the fact that perceptions rule the roost. If that's what you're after, then what you want to do is make sure that you're approaching each decision-maker's mind with some respect for the way it works. And that means you aim more at the perceptions that you're offering them than you do at the ideas, because your words aren't going to get a hearing until you've managed their perceptions.